Part 1, 3 Paths Toward the Middle Way. If Christians believe there is only one true God, then are Muslims wrong for worshipping one almighty God named Allah? And what about Buddhists? They worship no one at all. Does that mean they have turned away from truth? Throughout the history of religion, questions like these have stirred human debate for thousands of years. Christianity speaks of God the Father, Islam speaks of Allah, Buddhism speaks of liberation without a supreme deity. Each faith claims to seek ultimate truth, but each follows a completely different path. If you tell a Christian that Allah is also God, they may disagree. If you tell a Muslim that God and Allah are one and the same, they will likely not accept it either. And if you ask a Buddhist why they worship no one, they might simply answer, there is no need to worship. There is only the need to understand. The differences seem sharp and absolute, yet all three paths reflect a shared human desire to seek what is good, to seek what is true, to seek what is beyond the self. In Christianity, Jesus teaches, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is an absolute commandment, placing love for God above all else. In Islam, the central declaration of faith states, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. This is the foundation of belief, affirming that Allah alone is the one, the Almighty, and the most merciful. A Muslim submits completely to his will, believing that peace can only be found through that submission. Both religions teach the same essential truth. There is only one Creator, and humankind must direct all devotion and trust toward Him. The difference lies in expression, and in what aspect of the divine each tradition emphasizes. Christianity centers on love and grace. God is described as love itself, the one who redeems and forgives humanity. In Islam, Allah is exalted as the Almighty, the Supreme and Compassionate. Two different languages, two different cultures, yet both leading toward humility, reverence, and righteousness. Looking closer, we find shared roots. Both honor Abraham as the father of faith. Both believe in a final judgment, where every good and evil deed will be weighed. Both call for prayer, charity, and moral living. The distinctions are in language, in practice, not in the essence of faith. While these two monotheistic paths uphold belief in a single almighty being, Buddhism walks in a different direction. The Buddha did not teach people to worship a god. He taught them to understand themselves. He said, no one saves us but ourselves. No one can walk the path for us. The Buddhist path does not reach outward to beg for mercy, but turns inward to cultivate understanding. For Buddhism, if a divine essence exists, it is the enlightened nature within every being. There is no one to reward or punish. There is cause and effect, karma, and the human mind is the root of both suffering and peace. Instead of praying for forgiveness, Buddhists observe precepts, cultivate mindfulness, and develop wisdom to free themselves from attachment and ignorance. Three paths, three approaches. Christianity chooses love as its center, Islam chooses submission as its foundation, Buddhism chooses compassion and wisdom as its way. All three aim to free human beings from suffering and sin, though each speaks in a different language of the same aspiration, to move toward goodness, purity, and serenity. If we place these three faiths on one plane, we can trace a single shared axis, the act of letting go of the ego to connect with something higher. For Christians, that higher is the love of God. For Muslims, it is the will of Allah. For Buddhists, it is enlightenment beyond self. Each path asks humanity to release pride, to overcome selfishness, the root of suffering. From this view, the middle way is not about choosing the right religion, but about living truthfully according to one's belief. If you are Christian, Love as Jesus taught, unconditionally. If you are Muslim, submit to Allah with justice and mercy. If you are Buddhist, keep a kind heart. Live mindfully, and remain awake in every act. Then the three paths, though distinct, meet at a single point. A human being living for what is good, for compassion, for truth, without extremism, without exclusion, without judgment, seen in this light. Christianity teaches unconditional love, Islam teaches complete submission, Buddhism teaches non-attachment and selflessness. These are not contradictions. They are parts of one complete circle of human spirituality. Love, humility, and awakening. Perhaps the middle way is not a new road, but the meeting point of these three ancient ones. A place where people no longer ask, who is right? Who is wrong? But instead, am I living rightly according to the good within me? Thus, whether you worship God, submit to Allah, or simply purify your mind as a Buddhist, each can lead to the same destination, a place where the human heart understands itself, and learns to love all beings. In the next part, we will explore the central axes of each faith in greater depth. Worship in Christianity, submission in Islam, and mind cultivation in Buddhism. Through this, we will begin to uncover the true nature of the middle way, the shared spiritual path of humankind. Part 2, the central axes of three faiths. Every major religion of humankind builds upon a spiritual axis, a single principle that connects its believers to what they consider sacred truth. In Christianity, that axis is worship, the act of loving God with all one's being. In Islam, it is submission, the surrender of the self to Allah's will. And in Buddhism, it is cultivating the mind, the steady purification of thought and heart toward enlightenment. Three paths, three expressions, one essence. Each is a way for humanity to step beyond the self and live in harmony with what is higher, purer, and truer than ego. In the Christian vision, worship is not mere ritual or ceremony. It is a life lived in the presence of God. To worship God means to love Him, not out of fear, but out of gratitude and devotion. Jesus said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength." This is not an order of obedience. It is an invitation to relationship. It asks that every aspect of life, thought, emotion, and action become an expression of love toward the Creator. In Christian theology, love and faith cannot be separated. To love God is to trust Him. To trust Him is to act according to His commandments. And those commandments are built upon one foundation: love your neighbor as yourself. Thus, worship in Christianity is not confined to prayer or church attendance. It is revealed in every gesture of compassion, when one forgives instead of retaliates, when one shares bread with the hungry, when one speaks truth with humility. Those are acts of worship. The heart of worship lies in alignment. When human desire aligns with divine goodness, when choices flow from love instead of pride, worship happens naturally, without need for words. The prophets of the Old Testament often reminded Israel that burnt offerings and sacrifices meant nothing if hearts were unjust and unkind. The New Testament continued this idea: God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and in truth. This means worship is not found in external performance, but in inward transformation. It is not what the lips say, but what the heart truly seeks. The Christian, then, is called not only to pray, but to live in such a way that every action becomes a prayer, every act of kindness becomes an offering, every heartbeat becomes an echo of divine love. To worship God is to see all creation as sacred, to look at another human being and recognize the image of the Creator within them. This is why Christianity places love at the center of everything. Because through love, the distance between heaven and earth disappears. Islam teaches that peace comes only through submission. Not blind submission to authority, but conscious, willing surrender to the will of Allah. The very word Islam means surrender. And from the same root comes salam, meaning peace. In other words, true peace is the result of true surrender. The Islamic creed begins with the simple yet profound testimony, there is no God but Allah. And Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. This declaration, called the Shahada, is not just spoken once in a lifetime. It is renewed daily, in prayer, in action, in thought. It serves as a constant reminder that human beings are not the masters of their fate. They are servants of the Almighty, living according to His wisdom. To live as a Muslim is to live within a rhythm of remembrance. The 5 daily prayers mark the hours of the day, drawing the believer back to the center again and again. Each time one bows, the body reminds the soul, I am not supreme. Allah alone is. The Quran says, indeed, my prayer, my sacrifice, my life, and my death are for Allah, Lord of the worlds. This idea encompasses everything, that the whole of life, not just moments of worship, belongs to the divine. The 5 pillars of Islam embody this truth: faith, prayer, charity, fasting, and pilgrimage. Faith affirms the foundation. Prayer maintains the connection. Charity expresses compassion. Fasting disciplines desire. Pilgrimage unites the community in humility. Together they form a life pattern where every act points back to Allah. Submission in Islam is not oppression. It is liberation from the tyranny of the ego. When a believer submits to divine law, they are no longer driven by impulse, greed, or pride. They are guided by something constant, the will of God. In a world full of uncertainty, this submission becomes peace. Because if Allah is all-knowing, then trust in Him is the only rational path to serenity. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes Allah's mercy. My mercy encompasses all things. Thus, submission is not fear-driven obedience, but trustful alignment with divine compassion. To prostrate oneself in prayer is to let go of control, of arrogance, of self-importance. When the forehead touches the ground, the believer returns to the truth that all power belongs to Allah, and through that humility, the heart becomes light. The peace Islam offers is not political, nor merely emotional. It is the inner stillness born from knowing that life unfolds by divine decree. And within that decree, one's soul finds rest. Buddhism begins from a different starting point. Not from faith in an external creator, but from understanding the workings of the mind. The Buddha's first insight was simple and universal: life contains suffering. And suffering arises from craving and ignorance. To end suffering, one must understand and transform the mind. He taught, all things are preceded by the mind, led by the mind, created by the mind. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows like the wheel follows the hoof of the ox. If one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows like a shadow that never leaves. Thus, the essence of practice is mental cultivation, to train the mind toward clarity, compassion, and wisdom. The path is summarized in the threefold training: morality, concentration, and wisdom. Morality builds the foundation. Concentration steadies the mind. Wisdom brings liberation, to keep the precepts, such as refraining from harm, falsehood, and greed, is not mere rule following. It is a practical method to guard the mind from pollution. When conduct is clean, thought becomes clear. When thought is clear, insight arises. Buddhism also distinguishes between two forms of love. The first is attachment, love that clings and demands. The second is compassion, love that gives and releases. The path of enlightenment leads from attachment to compassion, from self-centered emotion to selfless understanding. The ultimate goal is nirvana, not a place, but a state where the fires of desire, anger, and delusion are extinguished. It is peace that does not depend on external circumstance. Buddhism does not ask for worship of gods, for even the gods themselves, in Buddhist cosmology, are still bound by impermanence. What it asks instead is mindfulness, the awareness of thought and deed, the recognition that everything arises and passes. When mindfulness matures, a person sees the truth of no self, that the I we protect so fiercely is but a temporary gathering of body and mind. When that illusion fades, compassion blossoms naturally, because one no longer divides the world into me and others. To cultivate the mind, then, is to practice the art of peace, a peace that no external power can give or take away. When we place these three traditions side by side, their outward forms differ, but their inner motion is the same, the movement away from the ego. The Christian worships through love, allowing divine love to dissolve selfishness. The Muslim submits through faith, surrendering the ego to Allah's will. The Buddhist cultivates through wisdom, seeing through the illusion of I and mine. In all three, freedom does not come from power. It comes from humility. When the self is small, truth becomes large. When pride falls, compassion rises. When desire quiets, peace appears. These are not opposing doctrines, they are different doorways to the same spiritual reality. Worship, submission, and mindfulness, each is a method of alignment between the human and the divine. The language changes, but the goal remains one, to become whole. The middle way is often misunderstood as compromise or neutrality. In reality, it is a state of harmony, a balanced path that transcends extremes. In Christianity, the middle way is expressed as the union of love for God and love for neighbor. It rejects both cold legalism and careless faith. It teaches that belief must manifest in compassion. In Islam, the middle way is submission with understanding, faith balanced by reason, obedience guided by mercy. The Prophet Muhammad once said, "The best of affairs is that which is moderate." This spirit of moderation runs through Islamic ethics, reminding believers that excess, even in devotion, leads to imbalance. In Buddhism, the middle way was the Buddha's first discovery, avoiding both indulgence in pleasure and self-punishment through asceticism. It is the equilibrium between body and spirit, effort and rest, emptiness and compassion. All three point toward the same wisdom, that truth exists not in extremes, but in balance. The middle way also becomes a bridge among religions. When we understand that each path seeks harmony, we no longer compete for ownership of truth. Instead, we recognize that truth itself is vast enough to hold many expressions. No single faith has the whole of it, yet each carries a fragment of the same light. To walk the middle way is to learn to hold differences without hostility, and to meet others without judgment. At the heart of all faith is humility. To love God, to submit to Allah, to cultivate the mind, these are not acts of separation. They are movements toward the same center, toward peace, toward understanding, toward unity. When love replaces pride, when faith replaces fear, when wisdom replaces ignorance, then the human spirit enters its natural state, balance. Religion, in its deepest form, is not a boundary but a mirror. It reflects the same truth through different colors. When one sees that, worship becomes universal. the prayer of the Christian, the bow of the Muslim, the meditation of the Buddhist, all become gestures of the same devotion, to worship God through love, to submit to Allah through trust, to cultivate the mind through awareness. 3 disciplines. 1 essence, humility, compassion, and the pursuit of goodness. When humanity understands this unity, the walls between religions begin to crumble. Differences become dialogue. Faith becomes shared language. The next part will explore the middle way in practice, how these spiritual principles move from belief into daily action, how they shape ethics, community, and the transformation of the world. It will show that true enlightenment is not distant or abstract, but lives within every act of kindness, every moment of mindfulness, and every prayer spoken with sincerity. Part 3, The Middle Way in Practice. The idea of the middle way is beautiful in theory, but its true value appears only when it becomes life itself. The wisdom of worship, submission, and mindfulness finds its meaning not in temples or rituals, but in the ordinary rhythm of existence, in work, in family, in choices made every day. The sacred does not live apart from the world. It breathes within the world, through the way we act, speak, and think. To practice the middle way is to bring balance into everything we do. It is to learn that faith must walk hand in hand with reason, that compassion must guide strength, and that peace must be built from understanding. It is not escape from life, but deeper participation in life. It is not turning away from the world, but seeing the world as a reflection of divine harmony. In Christianity, the practice of the middle way begins with love in action. Jesus did not simply teach love, he embodied it. His compassion was not limited to those who believed in him. He healed the sick, comforted the poor, and forgave those who condemned him. For Christians, the imitation of Christ means living that same love, practical, patient, and unconditional. To live the middle way in Christian terms is to hold the balance between faith and works. Faith alone is empty if it bears no fruit, yet works alone are hollow if not rooted in love. True discipleship lies where belief and action meet. When a person forgives instead of judging, when they feed the hungry, when they care for creation, they live the gospel without needing to speak it. In this sense, every Christian vocation is a path of balance. The mystic who prays in silence, the farmer who tills the soil, the doctor who heals the wounded, all worship God when their work is done with integrity and love. The middle way teaches them not to divide the sacred from the secular, because in God's eyes there is no division. All that is done in love is holy. The Apostle Paul wrote, "Whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God." That simple sentence is the essence of practical spirituality. It means that the smallest act can become an offering, the most ordinary moment a form of prayer. The middle way in Christian life is not about half belief or moderation in faith. It is about total devotion expressed through balanced living, love that is strong but not blind, zeal that is pure but not proud, hope that is steady but not naive. In Islam, the middle way is lived through submission integrated with daily life. A Muslim's day is structured around remembrance, prayer before dawn, at noon, in the afternoon, at sunset, and at night. Each prayer breaks the rush of time, reminding the believer that life is not a race but a return. Every bow is an act of humility. Every word of prayer is a realignment of the soul, but submission extends far beyond ritual. It includes honesty in trade, kindness to neighbors, justice in judgment, and mercy in strength. The Prophet Muhammad taught, "The best among you are those who are best in character." To practice Islam's middle way is to let that teaching govern every interaction. Faith is not only in the mosque, it lives in the marketplace, in the home, in the heart, The Quran describes believers as a community of moderation, standing between excess and neglect. This moderation does not mean weakness, but fairness. It guards against pride in religion and against forgetfulness of God. It calls Muslims to stand firm in truth, yet gentle in compassion. The Prophet said, "Make things easy, not difficult, bring glad tidings, not fear." This spirit of ease and balance is at the core of the middle way. When a Muslim practices patience instead of anger, generosity instead of greed, and justice instead of vengeance, they are performing jihad in its truest sense, the inner struggle to overcome the self. That is the essence of practical submission. The external world may change, but peace remains in the heart of the one who trusts Allah completely. During Ramadan, Muslims fast not only from food and drink but from arrogance, gossip, and cruelty. It is a training in moderation, a reminder that human needs are to be disciplined, not denied. In pilgrimage, they leave behind wealth, title, and difference to stand equal before Allah. Each of these practices is a living form of the middle way, balance between body and spirit, between desire and restraint, between individuality and community. In Buddhism, the middle way is practiced through mindfulness, an awareness that infuses every moment with clarity. The Buddha did not ask his followers to abandon life, he asked them to awaken within it. Meditation is not an escape but a mirror in which one sees the true nature of reality. By observing thoughts and emotions without clinging or aversion, the mind learns to remain calm amid change. A mindful person lives gently. They eat with gratitude, speak with care, walk with attention, and listen without prejudice. This awareness is the foundation of compassion, because when one truly sees, one cannot harm. To see deeply is to love naturally. The middle way in Buddhist life rejects both indulgence and suppression. It does not condemn pleasure, but it refuses to let pleasure become a chain. It honors discipline, but not self-torture. It invites balance, not too tight, not too loose, like the strings of a lute that sound harmonious only when properly tuned. In the Eightfold Path, each aspect of practice expresses this balance: right view balanced by right intention, right effort balanced by right mindfulness, right concentration balanced by right livelihood. Buddhism teaches that wisdom grows only when every part of life supports every other part. A balanced mind leads to balanced living. Balanced living opens the door to enlightenment. The practical middle way, across all faiths, is about harmony between inner belief and outer conduct. It demands that what we proclaim with our lips be reflected in our deeds. The world has seen too much devotion without understanding, and knowledge without compassion. The middle way is the cure for both: faith guided by wisdom, action guided by love, a Christian who loves without judgment, a Muslim who submits with mercy, a Buddhist who lives with mindfulness. These three are walking the same road. Their prayers may sound different, but their hearts beat to the same rhythm of peace. The middle way also calls for balance between contemplation and action. It reminds spiritual seekers that silence and service must support each other. Prayer without action becomes empty, but action without prayer becomes blind. To pause, to reflect, to breathe before speaking, these are acts of the middle way. To serve with humility, to give without expectation, to stand for justice without hatred, these two are expressions of the same truth. In modern life, where everything is fast, loud, and divided, the middle way becomes more necessary than ever. It teaches us to slow down, to listen, and to discern what truly matters. It asks that we use technology without letting it use us, that we seek knowledge without arrogance, and that we pursue success without losing integrity. The middle way is also the bridge between faiths. When a Christian meets a Muslim in respect, or a Buddhist listens to a priest without prejudice, the bridge grows stronger. True dialogue does not aim to convert, but to understand. It begins with humility, the recognition that truth is greater than our language for it. If we look closely, the ethical teachings of these faiths are not enemies, but reflections of one another. The golden rule in Christianity, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, finds its twin in the prophet's saying, none of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. And in the Buddha's teaching, consider others as yourself. 3 traditions. 1 moral core. When this understanding shapes daily life, religious identity becomes a source of peace, not conflict. A Christian working with honesty, a Muslim giving charity, a Buddhist teaching patience, each contributes to a shared humanity. The middle way transforms belief into action and action into compassion. Practicing the middle way also means accepting imperfection. Every faith acknowledges that humans are fallible. Christianity calls it sin. Islam calls it weakness. Buddhism calls it ignorance. But none leaves humanity without hope. Each offers a path of correction. Repentance in Christianity, forgiveness in Islam, and mindfulness in Buddhism all point to the same truth, that transformation begins when one sees clearly and turns back toward the good. The middle way is therefore not an abstract philosophy. It is the art of walking through imperfection with awareness and grace. It does not demand that life be free of mistakes, but that mistakes become lessons. It does not expect saints, only learners. In the realm of community, the middle way inspires social balance. It reminds leaders to serve rather than dominate, and followers to think rather than obey blindly. It teaches that justice and mercy must coexist. A society guided only by justice becomes cold, one guided only by mercy becomes chaotic. The middle way holds both in harmony, firm in principle, soft in heart. The environment, 2. Invites the practice of the middle way. The earth suffers from human excess, and faith must respond. The Christian sees stewardship as worship. The Muslim calls it amana, a sacred trust. The Buddhist sees the earth as interconnected life. In all 3, caring for creation is not an option, it is devotion in action. To live the middle way is to eat without waste, to consume without greed, to create without destroying. It is to recognize that the divine harmony we seek in heaven begins with the harmony we maintain on earth. The middle way also applies to the inner life, the dialogue within oneself. Every person carries contradictions, faith and doubt, hope and fear, desire and restraint. The middle way does not demand that one side win, it teaches coexistence. Doubt can purify faith. Fear can deepen courage. Failure can strengthen humility. When we see both light and shadow within us and learn to hold them gently, wisdom begins, in silence. The middle way whispers that peace is not the absence of conflict but the presence of understanding. It is not found by escaping suffering, but by transforming the way we see it. When we stop resisting what is, and begin to act from clarity, suffering becomes teacher, not enemy, at its heart. The middle way unites heaven and earth. It teaches that divine truth and human experience are not separate realms but 2 reflections of the same reality. When love guides reason, when faith informs action, when awareness illuminates every moment, then the sacred is present in the simplest things, a breath, a smile, a shared meal, a moment of forgiveness. In such living, religion transcends boundaries. It ceases to be a label and becomes a way of being. A Christian, a Muslim, a Buddhist, all can walk together when they see that the path of balance is universal. The form differs, The essence remains, to walk gently, to love deeply, to understand truly. The middle way does not belong to any one prophet or scripture. It belongs to life itself. It is the law written not on stone, but in the human heart. It is the wisdom that whispers across cultures, saying, "Be still, be fair, be kind, and you will know me." To practice the middle way is to live as if every act matters, because it does. To speak as if every word shapes the world, because it does. To think as if every thought plants a seed, because it does. In that awareness, life itself becomes prayer, and when prayer becomes life, there is no longer a line between the believer and the world, between heaven and earth, between self and other. There is only harmony, the silent music of creation returning to its source. This is the middle way in practice, not a distant philosophy, but the living art of balance. It calls each of us to worship through love, to submit through trust, to awaken through awareness, and to live as instruments of peace. Part 4, The Human Heart and the Universal Truth. Across the vast landscape of human seeking, beyond words, books, and rituals, there is one element that unites every path, the human heart. Long before temples or names for the divine existed, there was the quiet wonder of simply being alive. That awareness is the beginning of all wisdom and the birthplace of every question about truth. The heart is where every journey begins. It is the meeting point between the finite and the infinite, between human and transcendent. Every teaching, every act of devotion, every moment of insight tries to describe what the heart already knows, that there is something higher than ourselves, something unseen but deeply felt. Throughout history, guides and sages have spoken in many languages, yet their message carries the same pulse. They speak of love, humility, compassion, patience, and understanding. These are not inventions of culture, they are the natural language of the soul. The middle way, in its deepest meaning, is not a path between creeds but the path that runs through the heart of every person. The heart is where love and reason meet, where emotion turns into wisdom and wisdom into kindness. It is both fragile and infinite. It can hold faith and doubt, joy and pain, devotion and questioning all at once. Its capacity to contain contradiction makes it sacred. When wisdom forgets the heart, it becomes cold. When knowledge forgets the heart, it becomes blind to meaning. But when the heart leads, they all serve life. In one tradition, the heart is seen as the dwelling of the sacred, in another, as the mirror that reflects light, in another still, as the place where awareness and compassion unite. Each perspective points to the same truth, that purity of heart means clarity, not perfection, the ability to see without distortion, to love without condition. The journey is the return of the heart to its source through love, forgiveness, and trust. The teachings of the world agree that the heart must be kept open, for when it closes, understanding dies. The middle way at the level of the heart is harmony between love and wisdom. Too much emotion without clarity becomes attachment, too much intellect without compassion becomes cruelty. The heart balances them both, turning knowledge into understanding and devotion into living truth. Every being is born with a yearning to return, to belong to something vast and meaningful. Some call it peace. Some call it liberation. Some call it completion. But what we truly seek is wholeness. The feeling that nothing is missing. The heart is both the seeker and the path itself. When we follow the path of the heart, belief becomes gentle. We stop asking who is right and begin asking what is true. We stop measuring holiness by ritual and start recognizing it in kindness. We see that every act of care, a parent feeding a child, a friend listening without judgment, A stranger helping another, is a reflection of the same sacred impulse that moves all beings toward light. The human heart is also the place where pain gathers. Every wisdom tradition was born from suffering, exile, loss, persecution, or awakening before mortality. These stories remind us that understanding does not arise from avoiding pain but from transforming it. The heart learns compassion only after it has been broken. The universality of truth does not erase difference, it gives it purpose. Each path is like a unique instrument in a vast symphony. One sings of love, another of surrender, another of awareness. When each plays sincerely, the harmony becomes complete. The problem begins only when one instrument tries to silence the others. The middle way teaches listening to others, to nature, to the quiet inside. When we truly listen, without the noise of pride or fear, we discover that every soul seeks the same peace. The words differ, but the silence behind them is the same. In that silence, truth reveals itself. Within the heart, truth is never foreign. When we hear it, we recognize it. No matter whose lips speak it. That recognition is the essence of unity. It allows one person to be moved by compassion spoken in another's tongue, or inspired by wisdom written in a distant age. The heart does not care for labels, it responds only to sincerity. When a word carries truth, it resonates like a familiar melody. When an action expresses love, the heart understands immediately. The journey toward universal truth, then, is not about abandoning one's path, but deepening it until it touches the core all paths share. It is seeing one's belief not as a wall but as a window, a way to glimpse the infinite. The clearer the window, the more light shines through. Throughout history, mystics and poets have spoken of this unity. They saw kinship in all life, called the sun their brother and the moon their sister, felt the pulse of the infinite in their own breath. They realized that the eye through which we see the sacred is the same eye through which the sacred sees us. Across ages and cultures, others have spoken the same. They said, the lamps are different, but the light is the same. In the awakened heart, wisdom and compassion flow together, seeing clearly, loving deeply, and moving freely. The universal truth that arises from the heart can be expressed in three simple movements: love, humility, and awareness. Love gives life meaning. Humility keeps love honest. Awareness keeps love wise. When these three move together, the human heart becomes a reflection of the divine order. Love without humility becomes pride. Humility without awareness becomes weakness. Awareness without love becomes detachment. But when they unite, the result is harmony, understanding that acts, compassion that liberates, and insight that heals. To live this truth, one does not need a title or a temple. One only needs to live consciously, to love, to serve, to forgive, to listen, to recognize the sacred in every face. These are the real prayers of life. The middle way, when lived through the heart, is not about moderation of passion, but purification of intention. It is not half-heartedness, but wholeness. It is to act without selfishness, to love without possession, to give without expectation. In our age of division, the heart reminds us that truth cannot be captured by one word or one name. It shines through all, through art, through silence, through simple kindness between people. The task of the seeker is not to choose one ray against another, but to follow the light back to its source. To walk this path is to become both student and teacher. Each moment teaches something about patience and gratitude. Each encounter offers a chance to express what has been learned. The heart that sees the sacred in all things becomes a mirror in which others may see it too. And so the universal truth is not distant. It lives here, in compassion, in forgiveness, in the awareness that connects all beings. It whispers in one voice to everyone, "You are part of me, and I am within you." When we listen, the barriers fall away. What remains is one humanity, one breath, one shared heart. The journey ends not in conquest but in understanding, not in possession of truth, but in becoming it. When we live from the heart, we remember what has always been true, that love, awareness, and humility are the quiet laws of the universe, and through them, the world is made whole again. Part 5, The Path Beyond Boundaries. Humanity has always searched for meaning. From the first fire lit in the caves to the cathedrals and mosques that pierce the sky. From the silent monasteries to the crowded streets. Human beings have looked upward and inward, asking the same question, why are we here? That question has shaped civilizations, inspired art, and given birth to every faith. Yet the more we build walls around the answers, the farther we move from the simplicity of the question itself. The middle way teaches that truth is not confined within walls. It flows like water, shaping itself to every vessel, nourishing all it touches, yet belonging to none. Every religion has carried that water in its own cup, but the water itself is one. To see that, one must look beyond boundaries, beyond labels, beyond the illusion of separation. Throughout history, boundaries have defined human life, boundaries of land, language, class, and creed. They protect identity but also divide hearts. When people forget that the divine cannot be limited by borders, faith turns into ideology and devotion becomes rivalry. The tragedy of religion is not belief itself, but the forgetting of its purpose. To walk the path beyond boundaries is to return to that purpose, to rediscover the unity behind diversity. It is to remember that every prophet pointed not to himself but to the same light. Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Muhammad said, "I am only a messenger." The Buddha said, "Be a light unto yourselves." Each one, in different words, reminded us that truth is not a possession but a direction, a way of being. When we move beyond boundaries, worship becomes universal. It no longer belongs to one name, one place, or one people. It becomes the natural posture of the soul, gratitude for existence, reverence for life, love for all. To kneel is not to surrender to an image, but to acknowledge something greater than oneself. To bow is to remember humility. To pray is to remember connection. The path beyond boundaries is not about blending religions into one. It is about seeing the shared horizon they all face. Each faith offers a facet of the infinite, and only together can they reflect the whole. To deny any is to lose a color from the spectrum of divine light. To honor all is to let that light shine in fullness. In the Christian path, love remains the key. To love as Christ loved, unconditionally, is already to cross every boundary. Love has no nationality, no creed, no language. It does not ask who you are before it helps. It simply acts. When a Christian lives that love, they embody the essence of worship. The cross, in its deepest meaning, is not a symbol of suffering alone, but of the meeting of heaven and earth, of the vertical divine reaching into the horizontal human. That intersection is the heart, where all opposites are reconciled. In Islam, to move beyond boundaries is to embrace the universality of Allah's mercy. The Quran calls him Lord of all worlds, not of one nation or one faith. His compassion is not reserved for believers alone, it extends to every creature. The Prophet said, "All creatures are the family of Allah, and he loves most those who are kindest to his family." To live that kindness is to practice true submission, not just in prayer, but in justice, in service, in peace. In Buddhism, To move beyond boundaries is to dissolve the illusion of separation. When the self is seen as part of all life, compassion arises naturally. The enlightened one no longer asks, "Who am I?" but rather, "What can I do for the whole?" The Bodhisattva returns again and again to ease suffering. Not because he must, but because he sees no difference between himself and others. That is the middle way beyond self and other, beyond heaven and earth. When we bring these visions together, they form a complete circle. Love without wisdom becomes attachment. Wisdom without love becomes isolation. Submission without compassion becomes oppression. But love, wisdom, and compassion together create balance, the living image of the middle way. The future of spirituality may not lie in more doctrines, but in deeper awareness. The world today is interconnected as never before. A prayer whispered in one corner of the earth can reach another within seconds. The boundaries that once divided us are dissolving in the digital age. Yet our hearts still crave connection beyond technology, a sacred connection. The middle way calls humanity to build that connection. Not through uniformity, but through understanding. To walk the path beyond boundaries in modern life means to live with inclusiveness. It means a Christian can admire the wisdom of the Quran without fear. A Muslim can feel moved by the compassion of the Buddha without guilt. A Buddhist can respect the faith of a Christian without condescension. It means that truth can be celebrated wherever it is found. This is not relativism. It does not say that all ideas are equal. It says that all sincere seeking is sacred. Truth is not a competition, it is a revelation. Each of us receives a fragment of it. And only through dialogue, humility, and openness can we see more clearly. The heart of this path is compassion in action. It is the courage to stand for peace when the world demands sides. It is the willingness to forgive when revenge seems justified. It is the quiet strength to remain kind in the face of hatred. These are not small things, they are revolutions of the spirit. The path beyond boundaries also includes the relationship between humanity and nature. The earth is not property but home. The forests, rivers, and animals are not resources to consume but relatives in creation. The same breath that animates human lungs moves through the trees and the wind. Every tradition affirms this truth in its own way. Genesis calls humanity stewards of the earth. The Quran calls it a trust, an amana. The Buddha calls it interdependence, the understanding that to harm the web of life is to harm oneself. To live spiritually today means to live responsibly, to use without wasting, to build without destroying, to prosper without greed. The middle way teaches that balance applies not only to the soul but to society and the planet. The imbalance of greed and indifference has brought suffering to the earth. The return to balance begins with gratitude. Gratitude turns consumption into communion. It transforms ownership into stewardship. To walk the path beyond boundaries also means to recognize that the sacred and the secular are not enemies. Politics, art, science, and religion are not separate realms but expressions of the same human longing for order and meaning. When guided by the heart, science becomes service. When guided by truth, politics becomes justice. When guided by beauty, art becomes prayer. The middle way invites each to find its harmony, each to serve life rather than ego. The greatest boundary humanity faces is fear, fear of difference, fear of loss, fear of the unknown. Fear builds walls where love would build bridges. The path beyond boundaries asks us to face fear with understanding. When we see the stranger as reflection, not threat, fear loses power. The neighbor, the refugee, the believer of another faith, each carries the same spark. The only true other is ignorance. The middle way teaches us to meet the world not with reaction, but with awareness. When confronted by conflict, ask not who is wrong, but what can bring harmony. When tempted by pride, remember humility. When burdened by despair, remember that every dawn begins in darkness. Balance is not the absence of struggle, it is the art of standing firm amid change. Walking beyond boundaries also means reconciling faith with doubt. Doubt is not the enemy of faith, it is its shadow and its teacher. Blind belief leads to fanaticism, blind skepticism leads to emptiness. The middle way walks between, questioning with reverence, believing with reason. It holds mystery with both awe and inquiry. This balance keeps faith alive and growing, in each person's life. There comes a moment when boundaries dissolve, sometimes through loss, sometimes through love, a child's birth, a stranger's kindness, a silent prayer at the edge of grief. These open the heart beyond doctrine. In that space, labels vanish, and what remains is pure presence. That is the moment when one truly walks the path beyond boundaries, not as Christian, Muslim, or Buddhist, but as human. To reach that state is not to abandon identity, but to transcend its limits. A river does not cease to be a river when it flows into the ocean, it becomes part of something vast. In the same way, faith does not disappear when it merges with universal truth, it finds its fulfillment. Every spiritual path begins with identity and ends with unity. The journey from I believe to I am is the same journey from separation to wholeness. It is not an escape from individuality but the flowering of it within a greater harmony. When a believer truly knows their faith, they also recognize the truth in others. To see the divine only in one's own tradition is to see with one eye closed. The path beyond boundaries does not erase the past. It honors it. It sees history not as a battlefield but as a classroom. Humanity has learned through suffering, now it is time to learn through compassion. The wars fought in the name of religion must give way to cooperation in the name of love. The prophets of the past lit the way, it is for us to keep the fire burning, not to use it to destroy. The middle way beyond boundaries is a way of remembering that diversity is not division but design. Just as light refracts through a prism to reveal its colors, divine truth refracts through cultures to reveal its richness. Each color is necessary, without one, the light is incomplete. This understanding marks the evolution of faith, from belief that divides to wisdom that unites. The future of religion may not be new revelation but renewed realization. The next prophet may not come to start another faith but to remind us of the one truth shining through all. That truth is simple: love one another, serve one another, and live with awareness. Every holy book repeats it in its own rhythm. Every tradition frames it in its own story. Every human heart knows it without words. The path beyond boundaries is not the privilege of saints, it is the destiny of humanity. To live it, we must begin where we are, with kindness in speech, with honesty in work, with gratitude in breath. These are the first steps on the path that leads everywhere. As we walk it, our vision widens. The stranger becomes brother. The enemy becomes teacher. The world becomes sacred ground. In that vision, prayer and life become one. Faith no longer needs to prove itself, it simply shines. God is no longer far above, he is near, within every pulse of life. The middle way leads us to that realization, that heaven was never elsewhere. It was waiting in the human heart all along. This is the path beyond boundaries. It is the journey from belief to being, from division to unity, from seeking to seeing. It asks for nothing but sincerity and gives back everything: peace, purpose, and the quiet joy of belonging to all that exists. And so the story comes full circle. From worship to submission, from mindfulness to compassion, from balance to universality. The truth that once seemed scattered across mountains and scriptures now reveals itself as one vast horizon. The path remains the same as it has always been, not a road outside us, but the awakening within us. To walk it is to remember what we truly are, not merely believers, not merely seekers, but expressions of the same eternal light. Beyond every boundary, beyond every name, there is only one reality, one source, one love, and it is this love that holds the stars, sustains the earth, and beats within every human heart. Epilogue: the quiet light within. In the end, every journey returns to silence, after the words are spoken, after the prayers are said, after the debates and doctrines fade into memory. What remains is the quiet rhythm of breath, the simple miracle of being alive. The middle way has led us through worship, submission, and mindfulness, through balance and unity, and finally beyond all boundaries. And now it leads us home, to the stillness within. There is a light in every human being that never goes out. It flickers when we are born, glows softly when we love, and shines most clearly when we forgive. It cannot be owned by any religion, captured by any book, or confined by any temple. It belongs to no one, and therefore to everyone. That light is the divine presence, the quiet awareness that sees, feels, and loves through us. The ancients called it many names: the soul, the spirit, the heart, the spark of God. But names are only fingers pointing to the same flame. What matters is not how we describe it, but how we live from it. When that light guides our thoughts, peace follows. When it guides our words, truth follows. When it guides our hands, compassion follows. The world often forgets this quiet light. It drowns it in noise, in conflict, in competition, in fear. But even when buried under darkness, it waits patiently, never demanding, never fading. All it asks is attention, to pause, to breathe, to remember. The silence of the heart is not emptiness. It is the space where all life meets. In that silence, there is no Christian or Muslim or Buddhist, only the gentle pulse of being, only awareness that loves, only love that understands. Perhaps that is the final truth the middle way reveals, that heaven and enlightenment, paradise and peace, are not destinations but dimensions of the heart. They are not found by going elsewhere, but by seeing differently. When the eyes of the heart open, everything becomes sacred: the morning light through a window, the sound of rain, the laughter of a child, even the tears of loss. Every moment whispers, "You are part of me." To live with this awareness is to live in prayer without words. It is to bow not just in temples, but in the presence of life itself. It is to see that God is not far away, but near as breath, as near as love, as near as this very moment. And so, the path does not end. It only widens. The more we walk it, the more we see how vast and gentle truth really is. The saints and sages who walked before us did not reach the end, they simply dissolved into light. And that light continues in us. Every act of kindness extends it. Every moment of forgiveness strengthens it. Every gesture of understanding keeps it alive. This is how the divine works in the world, not through thunder or miracles, but through ordinary hearts illuminated from within. Perhaps one day, when humanity grows quiet enough, we will hear that light speaking again, not in words, but in the language of peace. And we will know that the middle way was never a theory, never a system, it was always the way home. Until then, we walk, step by step, breath by breath, guided by the quiet light within.